Hello YouTube, welcome back to my playthrough of Mafia Definitive Edition. I hope you guys are enjoying this series. If you are, to drop a like, it does help my series out a lot. But anyways, let's continue where we left off here. We're going to do one of my favorite missions on this part here. Bon Appetit is what this chapter is called here.
Sounds like Salieri was getting ready to make his move.
Working up to it, maybe. But then, Prohibition ended, and the bootlegging business got knocked on its ass. All that fighting over booze meant next to nothing. It took us a few years to recover. But when we did bounce back, boy, it was something. We took what dough we had from the moonshine and Canadian whiskey and invested it into new rackets. Some of them even legal. Construction, restaurants, trucking, gambling. We branched out into everything, except peddling dope. By 35, things were looking up. We had good money rolling in on the regular. I had a wife and daughter. Sam was running a club for the Don. Even Paulie had a few rackets of his own. Wasn't exactly happy, but what do you call it?
Content.
Yeah, that was it. And Salieri, he finally starts talking about getting out of Morello's shadow. Maybe buying our own cops, our own politicians.
That's interesting. You think Salieri was sourcing highbinders in 34?
Maybe. Why?
Well, a few years back, the Vice Squad got a judge on solicitation of a minor. Once in the box, he started confessing all sorts of misbehaving, trying to get a deal. But he copped to taking kickbacks from Morello and your man Salieri. Playing them off one another, trying to goose the take. But once Morello found out, he threatened to bury the judge's kids on the beach. Still breathing, of course.
Christ. That was the missing piece.
How's that?
Morello was always winding us up. But he never did anything that might start an all-out war. Learning Salieri was building his own bench must have finally tipped his scales, because in 35, he hit us with both barrels.
So make sure you remember that Tommy says we did everything except selling dope, drugs. That's pretty important there. And this chapter is going to take place now in 1935, Bon Appetit. Yes, so Prohibition has been over for 2 years, so the Mafia's alcohol... At this time, the Mafia's alcohol rackets are gone. You know, it is, speakeasies are pretty much gone at this point, because there's no point in them anymore, because alcohol is legal. Mafia made a killing when alcohol was illegal, so the Mafia did not want Prohibition to end. They wanted Prohibition to keep going so that they can keep making a fortune from it, but Prohibition was pretty much over. However, though, Prohibition did not end the Mafia at all, because what Prohibition did was it strengthened the Mafia. The Mafia, just like Tommy said, the Mafia took all the money that they made from Prohibition, and the Mafia together, all the Mafia organizations that existed in America, they made hundreds of millions of dollars altogether from Prohibition. They made so much money. So much. Just think about how much the cartels are making from drugs today. It was basically on that exact same scale back then with the Mafia and Prohibition. They made so much. They made a fortune. They made the bulk of their money from Prohibition. And what the Mafia did was they took all of, even though Prohibition was, legalized at that point, it was, alcohol was legal now, they took all of that money and they invested it into new rackets. They, bought up casinos. They invested in banks. Got involved in construction, started unions. They got into pretty much everything that they could. So even though Prohibition was, ended, the Mafia just took their money and they invested it into new businesses. So basically, Prohibition just gave them that step in that door, and now they had a fortune to start running their business and other things. So what it basically did was it created a monster. That's what Prohibition did. Stupid politicians that created Prohibition. They caused so many problems.
On his face.
Tommy,
Oh, hey, boss, what's going on?
I'm glad you're here. There you go, boss. I'm going to Pepe's for lunch, but Carlo called in sick. You up for a drive?
Sure, boss.
Bravo. I'm already starving. You got a piece on you?
Yeah. You think I'll need it?
You know how it is. Things with Morello have been a little quiet lately. Maybe it's just got me jumpy is all.
Italian.
So how's business, Tom?
Hey, you know how it is. It's good.
Sure, I know the business. I see the books every day. But since what happened, I know that a capo needs to talk to his soldiers without some other guy getting in the way.
So Tommy is a capo at this point, by the way, and capo means capo regime, and what that basically is Italian. I will actually, it means captain in Italian, but I will actually have a chart up on the screen really quickly just to explain the mafia ranks. But basically, here's the mafia table, and what the mafia ranks are is the mafia ranks are at the bottom. You have associates, and associates can be really anybody. They can be people that are that the mafia uses to basically beat somebody up, scare somebody. You know, basically basic henchmen could be associates, but also associates could also be somebody higher up. Like, for example, they could be like somebody that runs a chop shop for the mafia, and the mafia brings them stolen cars and they strip it down for parts. An associate could also be somebody that runs like a specific business that like is connected to the mafia, somebody that's associated with the mafia. But the reason that some of the high level guys, like the guy that might run the chop shop, for example, the reason that they are not made men, which made men basically means full members of the mafia, is because they're not Italian. To be a made man, a full member of the Italian mafia, you have to be Italian. So even if you're not Italian, but you're somebody that does business with the mafia, you make them a lot of money, you're an associate. And now the next rank up is we have soldiers. Now soldiers are a step up from henchmen, where associate henchman will be somebody that starts working for the mafia, pulling some jobs, maybe beating people up, scaring people, possibly even do a few hits for them. But soldier is now a step up above that. Soldiers are still typically like henchmen for the mafia, but they're more higher up in the ladder, and they're full members of the mafia. So if a soldier gets killed, a made man, that is war. That is pretty much almost always war. It's a made man. And if an associate gets killed, a lot of times there's gonna be beef, but a lot of times they could solve it, they could figure things out. But if a soldier gets killed, that is pretty much it, is the declaration of war on the entire family. And soldiers typically are like, think of like Polly, for example. Polly is like the perfect example of a soldier. They're a made man of the family, they're not really running any businesses. They are, people that the mafia will send over when they need something to kill somebody, scare somebody, enforce them. What a soldier does, mafia's muscle. And then a step up after the soldier is the capos, capo regimes. Capo regimes, there can be, usually around 3 or 4 of them in a family, and a capo regime is a captain, and they are gonna basically have a bunch of soldiers in their crews. So they're gonna have like this few different crews, and there might be like 2 or 3 soldiers that are in their crews, and they report to the captain, but then the captain also reports to the boss. And the purpose of the captains in the family is the captains are usually in charge of a specific part of the mafia's operation, so they will be running something big. So like, for example, if we think of like the Sopranos, for example, in the Sopranos, like Vito, for example, Vito runs construction for Tony. That is what Vito is doing. He's primarily running construction. He's making a ton of money through construction. Another capo, for example, another captain might be, involved in gambling, the mafia's gambling operation. So it's basically like a way for the boss to divert the different businesses for the captains to run. And the purpose of the captains is to run their crew, but also to run that specific part of the business. So whatever part of the business they're assigned to, they're supposed to run it for the boss and maximize earnings so that the family gets the most amount of money. After that, we have consigliere, which is the next step. There's only one consigliere in a family. And what consigliere basically is, it is advisor. Think of like Frank, like for example for the Don in this game. A consigliere, or Leo Galante in Mafia 2. A consigliere is going to be usually somebody that the boss heavily trusts. It is usually going to be a very close friend, like a best friend, childhood friend, or a direct family member, like a brother, for example. And it's somebody the boss heavily trusts. The boss probably trusts the consigliere more than the underboss, even though the consigliere is a little bit less powerful than the underboss, but the consigliere is more powerful than the captains. A very powerful person. And consigliere is typically also the guy that will be sent over to negotiate with another family. So when another family, they're involved in some kind of business, consigliere will a lot of times negotiate that stuff. But a consigliere is basically an advisor to the Don. They will tell the Don what to do, advise them, this is probably what we should do. But about the consigliere is a lot of times somebody that they're really good at giving advice, but they're not necessarily leadership material. So like, for example, when you think of the Sopranos, In The Sopranos, Silvio Dante is the ultimate consigliere. He's really good at his job. He's really good at giving Tony advice. A lot of times Tony doesn't listen to him, but he's really good at his job nonetheless. But he's not leadership material. He's not a good boss. When Tony gets shot and he's in a coma, Silvio becomes acting boss and takes over, but he's not a good boss. He's not able to keep the crew in check, like, you know, to keep them all together from arguing. Like, Tony keeps them from arguing, but like Silvio, he's good at giving advice to Tony on how to run things, but he's not good at being a boss. And then after that, we have underboss. And underboss is basically the second in command to the boss. And underboss basically enforces the boss's will. So the boss will tell the underboss something, and the boss will check up on the capos, make sure that they're all running things, how they run things. If the boss is away on, you know, a trip, in prison or something, underboss usually becomes acting boss. And then you have, after that, the boss or the Don. That's basically, you know, self-explanatory. The boss is the guy who, you know, runs everything, you know, keeps everything in control, the guy who makes all the final decisions. It's his organization. So Tommy is actually a higher level in rank right now than Paulie. Paulie's a soldier, but Tommy's a capo. And that's one of the things that makes Paulie kind of mad. Paulie doesn't necessarily get mad at Tommy, but he gets mad that he hasn't been promoted. But the reason Salieri promoted Tommy is because Tommy's just smarter than Paulie. You know, Paulie's loyal, but it's just that Tommy is just more of a more smarter in regards to business and running things than Paulie is.
I guess we're mixing with a better sort of person now. And I like dealing with all these big shots we got on the pad. Anything's better than those grifters trying to shift their hooch before the 21st went through.
Ah, this is only the start of it, Tom. I got plans. Plenty of good people lining up for a slice.
Glad to hear it.
Oh, scratching the boss's car is not a good idea.
Must be nice for you. Some time away from Polly and his cockamamie schemes.
That's better conversation, boss. I'll give you that.
Sure I am.
Me, Sam, and Paulie, though, we're still real tight. We've been through some times together.
Yeah, don't I know it. You taste the cassata, Tommy.
Oh, more wine. Hey, more wine here, please, quickly. You're going to love this wine. It's a... Don Salieri. Welcome, my friend. Welcome.
Good to see you, Pepe.
Also, guys, tell me in the comments what you guys think. Do you think that Pepe actually considers Don Salieri his friend? Or do you think that Pepe is just scared of him?
Hey, come. Our guest has arrived, eh?
What's on the menu today?
My mother, she would be so honored if you tried her caponata.
Excellent. Bravo, bravo.
Molto bene. Oh, let me get you a chair for you, huh? Sit, please.
Look at how Tommy sits. He doesn't sit with his back to the door.
A Chianti. I've been saving this just for you.
Yeah, bene, bene, bene.
Enjoy, huh?
I'm glad you're off the roof, Tom.
Sarah threatened to leave me if I didn't dry out.
I know.
She told you.
No. I put her up to it. Drunkards get sloppy, Tom. I didn't want you to make a mistake we couldn't live with.
You know what that is basically? Is he told Sarah to threaten to break up with him unless he stops drinking. Tommy becomes kind of an alcoholic in this part. This part of the story wasn't really explained that well. I wish they would have explained it a little more. But it was after you know, Tommy had those incidents that he went through, like at the church and also with the trip to the countryside. You know, when he comes home bloody. You know, stuff like that. And also killing the councilman's son in the car. That Tommy starts eventually developing like a bit of a drinking problem. When, you know, Polly, for example, the last mission tells Tommy that he's the expert on alcohol and, you know, makes him try the Kentucky whiskey. I wish they would have showed that a little bit more, that Tommy had an alcohol problem. That's, I think, one thing that could have probably been a little bit better explained. But he basically, Salieri tells Tommy that I told Sarah. He's very direct with him. He's like, I told Sarah to tell you to break up with you unless you stop drinking. And then at the same time is, what does Salieri do? He orders wine. And he was testing Tom. When he ordered that wine, he was testing Tom to see if Tom would drink the wine. That's what he was pretty much doing. And what Salieri is basically saying to him is, Salieri's saying to him, I own you. You're mine. That's basically what he's saying in a way. So he doesn't say it directly. I don't know if Tom catches on, but he's basically saying, I am your master. I tell you what to do. You are my property. That is what Salieri's essentially saying. He's drinking in front of Tom, but then he's telling Tom, you can't drink because I said so.
For you? And for you.
Pepe, the meal is a masterpiece as always.
Molto grazie, Don Salieri. Praise from such a gourmet as you, it filled me with joy.
You wouldn't call me a gourmet if you knew what I had for supper.
This is based on a true event. This what happened right here.
Get down!
What the hell? Morello! Bastard could have at least let me finish my wine.
Hey, Salieri! Come out of there and we'll make this quick. Smoke them out, Joe.
Shit, watch out!
This is why this is one of the best remakes ever. This scene alone is just so cool.
We aren't going out the front door. Can you move?
Not fast enough. We're gonna ambush these boys. I'll keep them entertained while you slip out the back and circle around.
You sure, boss?
Blow them all down, Tommy. Not one of them goes home tonight.
Okay, boss. Be careful.
Tom, just be quick about it.
Notice what Salieri says is he tells Tommy tells Salieri that boss, be careful, and then Salieri says one more thing, Tom. It makes it seem like Salieri's gonna also tell Tommy be careful, but instead he said just make it quick. He doesn't tell Tommy to be careful too. But anyways, what I was gonna say about this is this scene was based on a real-life event. I know people are like, what? This scene too? Yeah, so the developers of the game took a lot of inspiration, especially from the Chicago underworld, and this scene was based on a real-life event. This happened in real life. A scene resembling this very much happened. So what exactly happened? So I'm going to explain a little bit of history to explain here, probably a couple minutes. But basically, here's what happened. Al Capone and Johnny Torrio were the running the Chicago outfit, which was basically the Italian mafia in southern Chicago. Now, the Chicago outfit was a little bit less strict than like the Italian mafia in New York. They had a lot of members that were not necessarily like Italians. They didn't have any made men, as far as I know, that were not Italians, but they were not as purely Italian as, like, for example, some of the New York gangs. But anyways, about it is they came in contact with the North Side gang. who ran the north side of Chicago. Now, the north side gang was a bit different in their structure. The north side gang was led by a man named Dino Bannion, an Irish-American gangster. Now, the north side gang, their gang was not an Irish gang. People think Irish gang when they think of the north side gang. The north side gang was not really an Irish gang. The north side gang was 50% Irish, so about half of their members were Irish Americans, but then 30% of their members were also Polish. Polish Americans, and then 10% I think were German Americans, and then the other were Welsh and English and Scottish Americans. But about the North Side gang, the North Side gang did not have made men like the Chicago outfit. They just had it. You were a member, and that was it. You were just a member of the North Side gang, and that was it. They didn't have like a whole made men thing. They had ranks. They had the boss, they had the underboss, stuff like that. But they didn't have the whole made men thing. But anyways, the guy that was in charge was Dino Bannion, and second in command was his childhood friend, Jaime Weiss, his real name Henryk Wojciechowski, which I'll talk about him in a moment here. But anyways, the Chicago outfit and the North Side gang had been hostile with each other. It was constantly, and a lot of it was started by Bannion. So Torrio had tried to negotiate. Remember how I talked about Torrio? Torrio was the ultimate gangster, because Torrio was a businessman first. He wanted to just resolve everything without violence. He just wanted, business to keep going, everyone to keep making money. He did not want a war. He did not want conflict. He did not want heat and attention. But Bannion, on the other hand, Bannion was a lot more aggressive. Like, he was just way more aggressive with them. And there was an uneasy truce between the two gangs where they both divided up Chicago. They said, this is the part we'll sell alcohol in, this is the part you will sell alcohol in. And they also owned a casino together, the North Side gang and the Chicago outfit, and then also the Jenna brothers. And Angelo Jenna had racked up a massive debt at the casino. And what happened was the Jenna brothers were pretty close with Al Capone. And what happened is they told Al Capone, can you help us out with this? And Al Capone said, sure, I'll forgive the debt. Now, they both owned a third share in the casino, and they needed Bannion's approval to forgive the debt too. And Bannion refused to forgive the debt. He's like, no, he has to pay the debt. He refused to. What eventually happened was some of Bannion's alcohol trucks started getting attacked by rival gangs. Now, I don't think that Torrio did it. He accused Torrio of doing it, but there is no proof that Torrio did it, because Torrio was a businessman first. He did not want to stir the pot. He did not want to cause, conflict with the North Side gang. And then what happened was, after all of this arguing and this problems constantly, one day, O'Banion calls Torrio, who's the boss of the outfit, and he tells him, meet me, at my brewery. I want to sell you my brewery. I will sell you, my entire, alcohol business. I want to retire. I just want to retire. I want to go back to my flower shop. I don't want to do anything with organized crime anymore. You sell it to me for $500,000, which was, that was millions of dollars back then. I'll comfortably retire, and you can just take over my territory. And Torrio was thrilled with this. Torrio was so happy, because he constantly dealt with Bannion for years, and Bannion was just arguing, annoying, aggressive. He had to appease him. Torrio appeased Bannion several times. He gave him concessions because he just did not want a war. And what happened is, he was so excited, happy that Bannion was going to sell. But then what happened is, Bannion had actually tipped off corrupt cops. He was not planning on retiring. He told corrupt cops to come into the warehouse, and the corrupt cops came into the warehouse, and they arrested him and Torrio. But they only arrested Bannion to make it seem like he was being arrested, but in reality, they just let him out after they handcuffed him. Torrio was actually taken to jail. And what happened was that Bannion did this on purpose against Torrio. Now, Torrio was furious at this point. He was angry because he dealt with Bannion for years, and Bannion was the one who caused this whole mess. Bannion was aggressive with Torrio, and Torrio constantly appeased him. Whenever Bannion wanted more money, wanted something extra, Torrio constantly gave it to him, because he did not want a war. He did not want, things to get out of control. He just wanted everyone to keep making money. That was it. But this was the final straw for him. When he violated business, which was, sacred to him, like doing this like a deal that they both agreed to, gave their word on, and he basically, screwed him over like that, that was it. And that was, even Torrio had his patience. And Torrio put out a hit on Bannion. What happened was, a guy walked into Bannion's flower shop and was telling him he wanted to buy flowers for his girlfriend. And I think this scene is actually in Boardwalk Empire too, But what happens is he then shakes Banian's hand, and as he shakes Banian's hand across the counter, two other guys come in and they just both blast him while he's shaking his hand, and it was the handshake execution. The exact same thing that Tommy did to that hotel owner when he shook his hand. He said, "Don Salieri sends his regards." That was a real execution. That's what that scene was inspired by. It was inspired by Banian's execution. Now, what happened was Banian was killed, and Banian did not expect this to happen. Banian did not think that despite him doing this, he thought that Torrio was still gonna, back down. He did not think that Torrio would actually have him killed, but that was the last straw for Torrio. After that, what happened was Jaime Weiss, his best friend, ended up taking over the Northside gang. And Jaime Weiss was Banian's chief enforcer and also his childhood friend. He trusted him the most. He trusted Jaime more than anyone else. Now, Jaime Weiss, one thing that I've noticed about Jaime Weiss is that whenever they talk about him in documentaries, they never explain his backstory. Like for example, like Making of the Mob, it was a documentary series that I watched on a couple years ago when it came out on AMC. Making of the Mob was terrible when it came to explaining Jaime Weiss's backstory. They explained that Dino Banian was an Irish-American gangster, but they didn't explain anything about Jaime Weiss's backstory. Jaime Weiss was not Irish-American. You would think that he's Irish-American because he took over the Northside gang. No. Jaime Weiss was actually Polish-American. He was actually born in Poland. He was born in, I think it was 1898. He was born in Poland, and he came to America when he was 3 years old. His parents came over, and then they moved to Chicago. Now, Jaime, about him, is he spoke Polish as well. He spoke Polish with his family, so he knew how to speak Polish, but he had a thick Chicago accent. He was fully Americanized. He grew up in America. But Jaime Weiss is the most dangerous Polish-American mafia boss in American history. He is the most dangerous guy, largest guy. When you think of the mafia, you typically think of Italians, but Jaime Weiss was the most powerful Polish-American mafia boss, and he took over after Banian was killed. Now, Banian and Jaime Weiss knew each other when they were kids. They were both thieves. They were burglars. They both broke into people's homes. They were they did a lot of jobs together when they were kids, teenagers, and so they had a long history together. And after Banian used Jaime as his chief enforcer. Now, Jaime's real name was Henryk Wojciechowski. That was his real name. That's how you say it in Polish. But the reason that his name was Jaime Weiss is he changed it to be more Americanized. That was it. Because a lot of immigrants back then, they actually changed their names, specifically their last names too, because their last names were a lot of times very hard for Americans to pronounce. So that's what he changed his name to. He changed his name to specifically to Jaime Weiss. Now, about this is Jaime took over after Banian was killed. And Jaime was furious, absolutely furious when Dino Banian was killed. And what Jaime did was he actually walked up to Johnny Torrio and he shot him. And Johnny Torrio actually survived. But after Johnny Torrio survived, Johnny Torrio said, I'm done with this. It's like, I'm not going to survive again. And he decided to retire. He's like, I'm retiring to Italy. And I talked about it on the Frank part, but he basically gave control to Al Capone, and Al Capone ended up taking over, and then Torrio ended up retiring. Now, Al Capone tried to negotiate with Jaime Weiss several times, tried to just end this conflict, say, Banian's dead, let's leave it at that, let's resume business, but Jaime was not having it. Jaime said, I have nothing to discuss with the man who killed my best friend. Now, Jaime Weiss was kind of similar to Phil Leotardo in The Sopranos, but a bit different at the same time too. What he was similar to Phil in is he was similar to Phil that he was very emotional, where Phil was very emotional. But the difference between Phil and Jaime was very intelligent, where Phil was just stupid. And also Phil was a coward, where Jaime wasn't a coward. The only similarities they have is they were both very emotional, but he was not going to negotiate with Al Capone. He was not going to make a truce. He refused on make a truce several times, and he went to war with Al Capone. Now, in 1925, Al Capone was in a restaurant, and his driver was outside, and Jaime pulled up with a Tommy gun, sprayed Al Capone's car, and shot up his driver. His driver actually somehow survived that shooting. But then, a year later after that, September 20th, 1926 is when this happened. This is what this scene is based on. So, Al Capone was eating in his restaurant. Al Capone owned the Hawthorne Hotel in Chicago, and this was a hotel and a restaurant. The bottom floor was the restaurant. Al Capone was eating with his bodyguard on the bottom floor, and it was just like that, just like what you saw there, that exact same thing happened. Is his bodyguard sat where he looked at the door, just like Tommy sat, the exact same way. And Al Capone's bodyguard saw 4 or 5 cars pull up with Jaime Weiss getting out. So Jaime Weiss and his guys, they got out of the cars, and then his bodyguard said, threw Al Capone to the ground. It's like Tommy threw him to the ground, knocked the table over, and threw Al Capone to the ground. And then what happened was Jaime Weiss and his guys sprayed into the restaurant just like that. Like they were literally on the street and they just with the Tommy gun just spraying into it. Now, the scene is a little bit different of what happened in real life compared to the game incident. Now, in the game, a bunch of people died in the restaurant. In real life, nobody died in the restaurant. A bunch of civilians got wounded. Al Capone didn't get hit, and his bodyguard didn't get hit. But Jaime Weiss in real life had even more guys than Morello has in this part. So there was actually even more cars. It was like 4 or 5 cars, where in this game it's like 3 cars of them pulling up. And they fired over 1,000 rounds into the restaurant. So even more than in this game. They're firing even more than in this game. And the Tommy gun, the most typical, there's a 100-round drum mag on it, but the most typical one was 50 rounds. And so if you have like 10 or 15 guys spraying into the restaurant and they fired 1,000 rounds, that means that they had to have at least reloaded twice. So both of them, each of them had to have reloaded at least twice to spray that amount. And Jaime Weiss was there with them. Jaime Weiss was having a Tommy gun and he was spraying it there. And after this, they drove off. They shut up Al Capone's restaurant, destroying it, and then they drove. They did not use a grenade. The grenade part was not... That did not happen. The grenade. The grenade was just a little bit extra that they added in the game, but they didn't have a grenade, and then they drove off after that. They didn't, go into the restaurant like in Mafia, trying to, find Al Capone and shooting him. Now, about this is, even though nobody died, a mother and child both were blinded. They were sitting near the door, and the glass shards went into their eyes, and they both lost their vision. So both the mother and the child lost their vision. It was horrible. And that just shows you how the Mafia does not care if innocent civilians are a lot of times in the way. Jaime did not care. Jaime basically just wanted Al Capone dead. He knew there was a bunch of innocent people in the restaurant that were also eating. He did not care. He knew Al Capone was in there, and he was just going to spray and shoot up the restaurant, even if he killed a bunch of innocent people or hurt a bunch of innocent people. He did not care. And the thing about Jaime is Jaime was a very religious man. Very, very religious. He walked around with a rosary. He always carried his Catholic rosary with him all the time. Jaime attended church. He went to church regularly every week, almost always to mass. And Jaime would routinely go to confession. He would go to confession. He would talk to the priest about the people that he killed, the people that he hurt, the people that he robbed, stuff like that. And the thing about this is you're probably wondering, why didn't the priest go to the police if, Jaime was confessing to all this stuff? It's because in the Catholic faith, a priest cannot tell the police about a confession. They cannot talk to anybody about the confession. They can't talk to other priests about the confession. They can't talk to police. Even if the police question them, even if the police threaten to arrest them, they cannot talk to the to anybody about a person's confession. It's a vow of silence. The reason is because in the Catholic faith, it's confessions are seen between you and God, and the priest basically is that messenger in between. And so a priest has a vow of silence. They cannot bring this up. So even if somebody says that they've killed somebody, that they cannot, the priest cannot talk about that, cannot bring that up. But the only thing a priest can really do in their faith is if somebody's like missing, for example, you have like a missing person, and then like somebody comes in and says, "Oh, I've killed this person." The priest can go to the police and tell them this person's dead. This person is deceased, just to give the family some closure. But they cannot say, who gave them the confession, generally. So that was it. That's how Jaime was able to, constantly tell the priest about horrible things he did, and the priest never... And there was also fear the priest was possibly even scared of him, too. But that basically shows you, is he pretended to be this really religious man, acted like this really religious man, but in reality, he was, a killer, a psychopath, in a way. He was very sociopathic, very aggressive. And about this is Jaime was such a crazy guy that what he would do is he would stand outside Al Capone's restaurant before the shooting even happened, like, weeks, days before this happened, and he would just yell at Al Capone, "Come on outside, I'm out here," just screaming at the top of his lungs. And this terrified Al Capone. And after these shootings, Al Capone built his bulletproof armored car. So that bulletproof armored car, the one that's also in GTA Online, the Roosevelt, that is, Al Capone built that car because he was so scared of Jaime Weiss and his drive-bys. So Jaime Weiss was the most, terrifying Polish-American gangster in history. He was a very, scary guy. When Jaime wanted to kill somebody, he would go with his guys on hits. He routinely went with his guys on hits, where Al Capone never went with his guys on hits. He was almost never there. Now, how did this whole situation end? How this whole situation end is Al Capone said that Jaime Weiss was the only guy that he was scared of. Al Capone even admitted this. He said, he was the only guy I was ever scared of. And that's the thing is, I wish that you would see him more in movies, because Jaime was a much bigger threat to Al Capone than Dino Bannion. But in movies, you almost always see that Dino Bannion is like the main antagonist against Al Capone, when in reality, Jaime was much more of an antagonist to him than Dino Bannion was, and he was much more of a threat to him. I think Al Capone even said that if Jaime Weiss was in hell, he would dare to get the devil to light him on fire with gasoline. That's, I think, what he said about him. So Jaime had no fear. He was not scared of anyone. He was very emotional like Phil, but he was not scared. He was not stupid, though. He was also a very smart man. How Jaime Weiss met his end, though, is Jaime Weiss would routinely go to a cathedral, church, and he had a lawyer's office that was like a block away, and he went to the lawyer's office. Now, Al Capone's guys rented a room on the second floor across the street from his lawyer's office, and they waited until he came outside, and then they just gunned him down in his bodyguard with machine guns. They shot him in the head also when they gunned him down. He was dead, instantly at the scene. Now, how did Al Capone's guards know that he was going to be there at the lawyer's office? Either because they followed his pattern, because he would go to the church and he goes to his lawyer's office a lot of times that was next door, or it was somebody ratted him out. Somebody possibly ratted him out. They knew about his schedule. I think the fact that Al Capone's guys were there, they rented out a room knowing that he'd be there, I think it's possible that one of Jaime Weiss's guys had ratted him out. Now, about Jaime, after Jaime died, what happened was his other childhood friend, Bugs Moran, ended up taking over. Bugs Moran is Irish-American. And Bugs Moran was still in conflict with Al Capone, but there was never really a big hit like with what Jaime Weiss did to Al Capone. And in the end, what happened is, in 1929, you had the Valentine's Day Massacre, where Bugs Moran had shot one of Al Capone's bodyguards before that. And Al Capone was just furious about that. And so what he did was, he had two gangsters dressed up as cops, and they walked into Bugs Moran's warehouse. Now, Bugs Moran saw the cops around the corner, and he panicked and he drove away. But that saved his life, because those two cops, they put everyone up against the wall pretending to arrest them, and then two guys with Tommy guns came in, and then they just gunned everybody down. They killed everybody. And there was only one guy who survived, and the only guy who survived in that shootout was this man called Frank Gusenberg. Now, Frank Gusenberg, if you notice, in GTA Online, notice how the Tommy gun in GTA Online is called the Gusenberg Sweeper. It's named after Frank Gusenberg. He was the only one who survived. His brother died at the scene, but Frank Gusenberg survived. When Frank Gusenberg was taken to the hospital, he was asked, who shot you? And he said, nobody shot me. He died a couple days later in the hospital from complications from the shootout. But that was that backstory. But that shootout destroyed the Northside Gang. The war was pretty much over. The Northside Gang was destroyed. Bugs Moran actually fled town. He fled Chicago. He went into he moved to different cities. He got into burglary, started breaking people's houses. He died poor. So he was not a gangster ever really again after that. Al Capone basically drove him out. But that massacre at the same time ended Al Capone, because the feds went after him. There was much more attention on him. But that's basically the backstory. I wish that Jaime Weiss would make more of an appearance in movies and also in games, because he is the most feared Polish-American gangster in history, or in American history, I should say. So out of all the, Polish people and gangsters, and Polish gangsters, they did exist, but they were much more stronger in Chicago. They weren't really ever strong in New York, but in Chicago, they were much more stronger. But I really wish that they would have shown him. In the game Empire of Sin, which is basically like XCOM of gangsters, I play Empire of Sin a lot. It takes place in the 1920s in Chicago. You can actually play as Jaime Weiss, but Jaime Weiss is not a boss. He's more of a hitman that you hire. But Jaime Weiss's signature weapon is actually the Tommy gun in Empire of Sin. And also what Jaime Weiss does is he actually curses in Polish in the game. So when he's in a shootout, he will actually curse in Polish. So the developers did get that right when it came to adding Jaime Weiss. But anyways, that was basically the backstory about that. I hope that you guys weren't bored of the history. But yes, this shootout did happen. This is what this was inspired by. Is that Jaime Weiss and his guys, they drove up and they just sprayed into Al Capone's restaurant while he was eating downstairs. His bodyguard noticed it, threw him to the ground. They fired over 1,000 rounds and then drove off. Now this guy, this chef, you can actually save this chef. If you don't act quick enough, that chef actually does die. Now did Pepe die? I can't even tell if Pepe died. That's the one thing I've never been able to tell about this mission. If somebody knows if Pepe died, let me know in the comments, but I wasn't able to tell if he died or not.
I'll be back once it's clear.
Oh, crap. Okay, yeah. Some grenades.
Angelo's coming through the alleyway.
Okay, and one other thing I wanted to comment, another historical thing. I talked about this a little bit on my last part, but the Mark II grenade, also known as the pineapple grenade, when you see them throw it in the restaurant, it is actually green color. That is historically inaccurate. That would not have existed back then in that time period. The Mark II grenade did exist in the 30s, but the grenade was actually painted yellow, which is actually where it got the nickname pineapple grenade. Now, why was the grenade painted bright yellow? It was painted bright yellow to basically to keep to let people know that it was explosive, to let soldiers know that it was dangerous. That was the whole purpose of it being painted yellow. However, though, this backfired really badly because when the U.S. was fighting the Japanese in the Pacific, like on Guadalcanal, for example, their grenades were on their uniforms and it was bright yellow. And if you're in a jungle environment like Guadalcanal and it's all green, and then your uniform is all green, but then you have this one big yellow, thing on your uniform, that's going to give your position away. And that's why a lot of Americans, for example, in Guadalcanal, they refused to carry grenades because of the fact that they would give their position away. And after so many Americans had complained about this, the U.S. government said, okay, we gotta change this, and they changed the color in like 42 and 43 to be a dark green to match with the environment.
Don Salieri! Boss! It's clear!
Oh, look at the balls on this kid. You really saved my ass, Tom.
We gotta go, boss. The cops will be here soon.
I need a minute to catch my breath.
Well, let me get you back to the bar.
No, not the bar. We're going to see Carlo. That son of a bitch knew where I was going today, and he calls in sick.
He set you up.
To us, Tom, you could have ended up just as dead.
Yeah, I know, boss.
Carlo's jacked up with some dame in Holbrook. Let's go see what he has to say about all this. Step on it, Tom. Every minute Carlo's still breathing is a minute that's got me pissed.
Sure, boss.
Can't believe these bastards had the brass balls to wreck my car.
Also, I wanted to comment one other thing on this. This scene here, this is another scene that's actually based on The Godfather, in The Godfather Part 1, because remember in The Godfather Part 1, what happens is Poligato, who is Don Corleone's bodyguard, actually calls in sick. And when he calls in sick, what happens when he calls in sick is Fredo Corleone is protecting Don Corleone while he's buying fruit. And the driver would know Don Corleone's route. He would know where Don Corleone is going. And Sonny Corleone figured this out, but Poligato was paid off by Sollozzo to tell Don Corleone what his route was, and then Sollozzo and his men tried to assassinate Don Corleone. The reason they tried to kill Don Corleone was because Don Corleone did not want to give them police and political protection, which he had a lot of, so that they could sell drugs, because Don Corleone did not want that. He thought that drugs would just be messy and would cause him to lose all of his businesses and all of his influential people. So that's why he didn't want to go into that. Sonny wanted to go into drugs, and he thought that by getting rid of Don Corleone, that Sonny would take over and be more inclined to go into drugs. But it backfired on him, and Sollozzo ended up losing his life in the war.
Had to be Carlo. You'd think those guys would have more in their hands today than trying to give us a ticket.
The guy's gotten away in North Park.
Had to be Carlo, didn't it? His pop was tight with Morello right when we started out. Apple don't fall far from the tree, huh? I wept at his funeral. At his son's, I'll be laughing loud. His mom's already a widow, Tom, and now he's gonna make her lonely till the day she dies. For what? Some dough to buy his dope? And my foot through his face. Know what? I'm glad. I'm glad this happened. I get to plug another rat, and we finally go to the mattresses with Morello.
That means war.
Today's the day the dam breaks.
Sure feels like it.
About Carlo,
You take a guy in, you give him a place in your family, you give him respect, and this is how he repays you?
If he's done this, what else has he squealed on? The farm, the betting house, the ambush at the parking garage, any of them could have been him.
they were all him. The reason that they were ready at the betting house is because Carlo told them. The reason they were at the parking garage and knew about that deal was because Carlo told them. The reason that the corrupt cops, the prohibition agents, were at the farm was because Carlo told them. Carlo was paid off by all of them on all of those occasions. So all of those problems have been because of Carlo. And remember in the last part how when the Don orders Carlo to go with them to the deal, Carlo basically says, I don't want to go, and he's making excuses because he knows the place is going to get shut up. That's why he doesn't want to go to the deal.
Boss, why don't you let me go first, huh? Carlo might be waiting for us.
No, Tom, my face is going to be the first and last thing this bastard sees. What the fuck? You goddamn dirty grifter.
You better dangle, sweetheart.
It's gonna be a closed casket, Carlo.
You okay, boss?
Yeah, just a little one. Let me catch my breath.
Jesus, he's fast for a big guy.
Don't let him get away! Help me, someone!
Also, this is better in the remake. The scene is better because in the original, Carlo ambushes Tommy with a bunch of Morello's men, and the reason they took out the Morello's men in this part was because it doesn't really make much sense why Morello would send bodyguards to protect Carlo.
They're going to kill me!
Hey, we ain't finished with you.
Please, I can explain. Think about this, Tom. Please. Let me talk to the boss. I can explain everything. Tommy, you gotta know. Bro, he was gonna kill Mom. I had to do it. I had to. They know. Please, I can explain.
Is he still alive?
I'm not sure.
Now we're sure.
Hey, Sergio, how are you? Keeping out of trouble?
Sure. Who's this? Wait a minute. Is that Gordy? It is. Hey, Gordy, how you doing, buddy? Hardly recognized you. What'd he do?
You said you were having some trouble down at the docks, right?
Yeah? It's nothing I can't handle.
Yeah, well, I did some asking around. This asshole was planning a strike. Strikes are no good for business. Unless you don't want to call him for it, right?
Right.
So I decided the union needed a change in leadership. Is that all right with you?
Of course.
Good. Now, what about that other thing?
That's why I'm here. Salieri's still alive.
God damn it! What happened?
I don't know yet. Crew we sent is dead. Restaurant's all shot to hell.
Stop your crying. Trying to have a conversation here. What about the cockroach Carlo?
Found him with his head smashed in like a fucking watermelon. Never seen anything like it.
Salieri must have figured Carlo was the rat. God damn it. Can't even hear myself think.
It's gonna be a war.
I told you to shut the fuck up! We've been at war since we killed Papone. It's just out in the open now.
What do you want me to do?
Make your rounds. Tell little boys to keep their eyes peeled and their powder dry.
Okay. Put the word out.
Hey. Just, keep your head down, little brother.
You too, Don Morello.
Let me see. Is it an intermezzo or is it the, But, in the original, I think that it's Morello that tells Sergio that Salieri survived. Okay, so it's another chapter. They changed it up there. Okay, so I guess we'll be, Morello started a war meet with Don to find out what happens next. Okay, so that's the next part. And I also have more cosplays, guys. I have 2 more cosplays still for this playthrough. You'll see another cosplay soon. But thank you guys for watching. I hope that you guys enjoyed this part. If you did, do drop a like. And I will see you guys on the next one. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful day, guys.